Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel that takes on narcissism and narcissistic relationships. So I'm going to put this to you as a question. How many of you in your narcissistic relationships, whether growing up or in a relationship, felt the pressure to be cheerful? Because if you weren't cheerful, the narcissistic person would be frustrated by you or angry at you. So you felt cheerful pressure. If you had that experience, drop it in the comments and let's break this one down. Let's even take it further. How many of you have heard things like this from narcissistic partners or family systems? Why are you such a sourpuss? Oh, can you smile? I like cheerful faces. Maybe things don't work out for you because you're such a downer. And if you've ever heard other things in the same vein, drop those in the comments. Narcissistic people and narcissistic family systems are often about superficial emotion, as well as about cruelty, mockery, and manipulation. So they'll manipulate and be mean, but then they'll expect everyone to wear matching outfits and smile big for the holiday picture. Sweetie, you seem to be gaining a lot of weight. Could you put on this new shirt? Narcissistic parents view children as their own personal mirrors. They expect the child to feel and behave in a way that works for them as parents, and many narcissistic parents like cheerful children. The general motto tends to be, in many narcissistic families, if it looks good, it is good. So the children are expected to be smiling and happy all the time. And if they're not, well, that can bring up some parental resentment, as well as accusations that the child is spoiled and ungrateful or damaged. So the child may learn to be cheerful and simultaneously also learn to suppress their emotions. Some kids keep it going like this into adulthood. Some kids will then turn to externalizing and may be more likely to have behavioral issues as they get older. They may act out in other ways. The internalizers will just be cheerful but be falling apart inside. Many people in narcissistic relationships will note that their partners would expect them to be cheerful, even after they had endured all kinds of bad behavior. Their needs weren't being met, their partner was of no support or help, and when they weren't cheerful, their partner would invariably gaslight and shame them and say things like, well, maybe I'd be nicer to you if you weren't always so grumpy and such a downer. So the person in the relationship, as most people in narcissistic relationships do, may blame themselves and start believing that they are the problem. They may even start attempting to be that artificially cheerful and sunny person all the time. Kind of has a Stepford wife vibe, like everything's fine, everything's great. Oh, I'm so happy. All of us are so happy. The kids are great. Everything's so great. They tend to speak about a half octave up. We're great. It's great. Narcissistic people like to keep things superficial and light, as a rule. However, it's a little bit more subtle than that. Malignant and our vulnerable/covert narcissistic types, not so much. But the grandiose and communal narcissists, well, they just like want things to be happy, great, life's great, I'm great. And so if you go up to them with your frown or your sadness, which may be reflective of your real emotions or even the actual misery of the relationship, that to them activates this discomfort. So they'll shut it down through blame shifting and shaming. Narcissistic relationships are difficult. Whether this was a childhood relationship, adult relationship, or you've had both, they take a toll on us. They leave us anxious, full of grief, confused, self-blaming. Again, not good for us. Many people will say their narcissistic relationship leaves them with a heaviness. And if we're acutely dealing with these relationships, we are not likely to be smiling all of the time. And even if these relationships are in our past, they do add a little bit of salt to our caramel. We're still delicious, but there's definitely a salty undertone. So it's not unusual for folks who have been through this to sometimes carry this sadness. And when that shows up, it'll get shamed or called out. Why can't you just be happy? In order to survive these relationships, what many people do is that they learn to fake positive emotion. But there's a problematic downstream effect if you do this. We slowly learn to deny our emotions. We may either get really good at playing it happy, and unfortunately, that sadness, anxiety, and the other fallout of narcissistic abuse, that stuff will find its way out another way, often through physical symptoms like headaches, stomach aches, sleep issues. Or we attempt to numb those emotions in other ways. That could include drugs, alcohol, or other numbing behaviors. All of this emotional faking can also be dangerous because we may miss depression, anxiety, treatable issues that aren't expressed and may get worse without intervention. But worst of all, we may get pulled away from our authentic selves. We may learn to become actors in our own lives, learning to be the most cheerful of all, giving in to keep things going. We get pulled away from who we really are, what we're really experiencing. In essence, emotionally gaslighting ourselves, and that is never good for us. My favorite, not really, I'm being sarcastic, but is when someone is willing to be vulnerable enough to answer the question, to really answer, how are you doing? And the person who's being asked will honestly say, I'm not doing so good, or I'm kind of going through a rough patch, or it's been tough, only to have the other person say to them, oh, come on now, it can't be that bad. Or other people have it worse than you. There are people out there who don't have a place to live or don't have enough food. It's not an either or. There can be other people suffering, and you can be suffering too. And yes, it can be that bad. The combination of the world's unwillingness to hold space for the pain of others, the push for toxic positivity we see everywhere, be happy all the time, and the demand to be cheerful in narcissistic relationships can take a real toll. This demand to be on, to be cheerful, everything's great. It's a classical flair of grandiose and communal narcissistic families and relationships. And even, frankly, narcissistic, grandiose, or communal narcissistic workplaces. It's not harmless fake smiling. To do this is the denial of ourselves, of our inner states. It's like saying we are not hungry when we are. It's like saying we aren't bleeding when we are. Faking emotion catches up with us and is just one more example of the long-term fallout of narcissistic relationships. As part of healing, it's essential that you find your safe places to share your emotions where they will be respected and seen. And as for the it can't be that bad folks in your life, put them up on the top shelf of enablers who just are not people you should be spending your deep time with. But that pressure to be cheerful, especially narcissistic families and relationships, and that you're the problem if you're not smiling all the time, and yet your heart is breaking every single day in these relationships, that's a lot to smile through. But unfortunately, a lot of people do learn to do that. And part of healing is allowing yourself to get back in sync with your emotion and giving as much space to the positive emotions as the negative ones. Thanks again.